Spend less time searching and more time hauling loads with the Truck Stop Load Board. Find the right load at the right time to put more money in your pocket. Learn more today.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call, the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we welcome Keith Matthews, President and CEO of NAD Logistics. Welcome to the show, Keith.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for having me.
I am excited for today. I know that cross-border has been a huge topic for a lot of people, but everyone has primarily been focusing on our southern border between U.S. and Mexico. Not that that's not important, but we also got to show that border between U.S. and Canada some love as well, because that's just as important, and doing just about as much in trade volume, but maybe just a tiny bit less. Before we get too far into that, though, let's get some background on you and how you got started with NAD Logistics.
Great. Well, I've been in the business for about 40 years. I founded Kelron Logistics in the early 90s. I sold it to Brad Jacobs at XPO in 2012. It was one of the largest 3PLs in Canada at the time. It became XPO Canada. And from that point on, we decided that we'd start NAD Logistics, which ended up being my warehouse business. That we repurposed as a 3PL in 2016. And my son runs the operation, and we've grown the business over the last 10 years to where it is today.
I think that's kind of an accomplishment. You kind of just said, here we go. We have this beautiful company that we've built up and sold and kind of done what we did there. And then, you know what, let's go ahead and do it kind of the same, but kind of different this second time, because there's still that need for it. And I mean, I've never really met someone in logistics that willingly wants to sit idly. We have the industry has like a knack of needing to always be doing something or solving a problem.
Exactly. And most of us that were young, you like that charge and that excitement of brokerage and 3PL. And I was in my 20s when I started it. And when I sold it, I was 49. So you're not really ready for retirement. And walking the beach and playing pickleball is not in the cards at 49 years old. So you still have a lot of energy, and you're still in a position to be able to build another company. So we ended up starting NAD in 2016 as a result, and here we are today, and it's continuing to grow. But it has changed quite a bit. The market is, as you know, and FreightWaves has been doing a lot on this in terms of how the market has been challenging for 3PLs and the trucking industry for the last 3 or 4 years. So anybody that's still in the industry and still in the business is a win.
Yeah. It's definitely been one of those last few years of, only the strong survive, but also how strong does this strong have to be? Because I can only take so many hits, man.
Oh, no kidding. It's been a real bumpy ride for a lot of people, I'm sure. And you interviewing a lot of different people in the industry, I'm sure have seen it.
Yeah, there's been a lot. And let's just say I'm hoping for a turnaround real soon. That's just like, look, money for all. It's gonna be great. Um, but before we get to that part where we get to say, surprise, everything's better, money for all, we do have to kind of take a step back and look at what's happening now. And that is, I'm going to call you the expert here in the cross border between US and Canada. I know a few things, mostly that the Canadian postal code has letters in it and numbers, or no, just letters. Um, and it throws off every single TMS that you've ever had in your entire life. But do you mind breaking down kind of what that relationship between US and Canada is with trade, and then also why it's so important that, this partnership maintain the current status that it has, and that we all kind of like basically how much commerce flows between the two countries.
So I view it like the trade deficit myth. and why America quietly wins with Canada. There's has been a perception that um, the United States has been ripped off by Canada or being ripped off. But I think what needs to be said is that there really is four pillars of the trading relationship that um, needs to be looked at, as opposed to myopically or being myopic and viewed and just looking at goods trade. And goods trade is only one piece of it. And granted, there is a trade deficit with Canada when it comes to goods trade. And that trade deficit largely is made up of the fact that a lot of it is oil. If you extrapolate oil and gas out of the trade deficit, the United States actually has a surplus of uh, goods trade. The second pillar is what I view the services trade, the likes of Netflix and Microsoft and other um, subscriptions and services that are purchased, such as consulting. Um, there's a $30 billion trade surplus with Canada when it comes to services trade. But the third pillar is what is viewed as foreign direct investment, which is FDI, which is investment in real estate, investment in stocks, bonds, other hard goods in the United States. And in that case, the Canadian investment in the United States is 680 billion, and the American investment in Canada is around 420 billion. So between the services trade surplus of 30 billion, which offsets the $68 billion trade deficit, and the foreign direct investment delta between 680 billion and 430 billion, and that's 2022's numbers, there's actually a gain on behalf of the United States. But the fourth pillar is U.S. owned corporations operating in Canada, which is FedEx Canada, UPS Canada, um, McDonald's Canada, Home Depot Canada, Lowe's Canada, Marriott, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And those companies have Canadian corps, and they repatriate their profits back into the United States up to their holdcos here in the U.S. And that's unquantifiable. And between all those four pieces, it's important to look at the entire trading relationship in its entirety, as opposed to only looking at the goods trade deficit, which is what's predominantly been in the media. And that's how I view the why America quietly wins with Canada.
It's all those like little things that kind of you like. I don't want to say they're not little, obviously, like billions of dollars are not little, but the things that you don't necessarily always think about because, like you said, they're the streaming services, they're the profits that companies that are based in the US and Canada recognize. And it's some of those things that you can't necessarily like touch. Like, you know, that if I take a bunch of lumber or timber or wood from Canada, I can say it's this value. Like, this much wood is this much value. The the others are just kind of like you can put value on it, but it's harder because it's less tangible and it's more kind of amorphous, if you will. But I guess kind of going into more of the physical trade, or I guess other aspects of it as well, within those 4 pillars you were talking about, what are some of those trends that you're seeing between the US and Canada? What are those, like, hot commodity or trade items, or like just policies that are coming across that you're like, "This is actually, like, pretty cool," or like, "Ooh, this is a surprising," for either side?
Well, and 85% of the products that are moving across the border right now are falling under USMCA, which is tariff free. So we're only talking about a 15% grouping, such as aluminum, steel, lumber, and those are the key commodities, and some farming commodities. Dairy, I guess, is another one that's in that mix. But for the most part, we're seeing that goods are moving freely across the border as per normal. And you know, the challenge for most companies has been the uncertainty surrounding the tariffs and the uncertainty as to what's going to be next and what's going to happen where. And I mean, a lot of companies they haven't changed their supply chains. They've just softened their supply chains and pulled back a little bit. And I think that's what you've seen over the last 6 to 8, 9 months since the tariffs were imposed. You can see freight volumes across the border have slowed only because people are pulling back and being very um, taking austerity measures. That's probably the best way to put it. To be careful what you purchase and where you purchase it, and as a result, it's not the free flowing purchasing and selling of goods like it was in the back in the days.
Back in the day of when things were a little easier and more predictable, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah.
trade flows aren't as free flowing as they were back in the day. So um, because people are just careful and cautious as to what they're purchasing and where they're purchasing it. Um, the the big one is the trade compliance departments have had their hands full. Anybody that's in trade compliance departments trying to make sure that they comply with the changes in tariffs crossing the border. What qualifies, what doesn't? Are they reporting correctly and making sure that they're reporting the goods that are supposed to be reported based on what tariffs are in place at the time that they're in? Some are on again, off again. So it's again, you're back to the uncertainty and the inability to predict what's going to happen next. And the poor trade compliance department, one day it's on, one day it's off. This one's in, this one's out. This one qualifies, this one doesn't qualify. It's a challenge.
I have never been so excited that I don't work in customs in my entire life than I have in 2025, because I would literally just show up to work that day and be like, I don't know what the tariff is. Let's just see what happens. Like, who knows? This has definitely been the year of, like, give your customs broker a hug. Give the person who calculates your tariffs and manages that side of your business, just like give them a nap and a hug, because like they're going through it.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. That's for sure. Um, yeah. So, but as far as infrastructure, uh, there's been a new bridge put in across the Detroit River, the Gordie Howe Bridge. So there's been significant investments in making cross-border trade easier and more free-flowing, which is a bit counter to where we are in today's environment, because there's been a lot of things that were put in place pre-2025, which include the infrastructure to be able to move goods across the border better by putting a new bridge in. B, all the technology that was put in place to clear goods at the border, including fast and pre-clearance and pre-authorization and all those types of things that were put in place to allow truckers to get across the border quickly without delay. So all the things that were done in the past now are manifesting themselves to allow this free flow of goods. And now we've put the brakes on that free flow. So um, we'll see where it goes. Someday it'll change.
I feel like it's just like a temporary break. But yeah, it turns out you can't just make a bridge appear overnight. They do take some time. Because somehow they have to figure out how to get the concrete to set in water. Um, I have no idea how that happens, but that's why I am not an engineer or someone who pours concrete into a river in a mold. Because it confuses me, but that's okay. Different folks for different strokes. I'll stick with the trucks that drive on the bridge. Um, but even kind of on both sides. So we have the new bridge that works, and the nice part about or not Mexico, U.S. and Canada is that there are quite a few border crossings, and it does seem to go a lot smoother than U.S. Mexico border crossings. But one of the things that we've seen in Mexico that I'm curious if it's carrying up to the cross border in the U.S. and Canada is not only extra bridges, enhanced facilities, things to make it so it's easier and faster for trucks carrying goods to go back and forth. So that way nobody's sitting in line for like 2 hours at the border, just trying to get paperwork signed. That's not really what a driver needs to do on any day. Um, so the um, but they're also investing in like the roads and the local infrastructure. Have you seen that kind of on both sides of the border between US and Canada, especially around where the new bridge was built in Detroit? Like, have you seen improved roads, routes that mean that truck drivers won't have to necessarily intervene with passenger cars as much, or maybe like bypass route? Has that been something that has been adopted up there as well?
Absolutely. They did in Windsor at one point. I'm sure you've been there before. The the truckers had to go through Windsor to get to the bridge, and now they'll be bypassing the main part of Windsor and going across at the Gordie Howe Bridge. So they did reroute the trucking equipment to get across the bridge and not have that congestion in the main area of Windsor. As far as the other border crossings, they're not as busy as what Windsor Detroit Bridge is. That's the busiest of all. Um, I haven't seen any changes in infrastructure in any of those other bridges. They're pretty much the same. So, but just in Windsor, to answer your question, yes, they did make changes to the roads, and they did that on the U.S. Detroit side as well. They rerouted
I feel
a
like
lot
you
of.
I feel like you'd almost have to, because otherwise, if you as volume continues and increases, you have more trucks, which is great for business and great for everything, but that's harder on your roads. That leads to more liability and more risk with passenger cars. Because as a passenger car, I see how people drive and well, I wouldn't want to interact with more trucks and more ridiculous passenger cars, especially up in Detroit where it's snowy and icy. I know Detroit understands the concept of snow and ice very well, but the rest of the countries does struggle with that. So,
Yeah,
um, it's good to know that there is kind of those investments in those bypass routes, so that way the drivers aren't wasting their time. We're not having injuries with motor vehicles or other things like that. Just to kind of, keep freight moving. What about
yeah, absolutely.
So, kind of with something that we talked about earlier, and this is something that I have been kind of keeping an eye out, but obviously it's still too early to really kind of make any long shot calls or have predictions or know what's going to happen. But I do like to wonder about it. So I'm going to ask you what your thoughts are. What do you think will come of the renegotiation of the USMCA? Because I believe it's up next year. So we do have to kind of start having those conversations on how we're going to renew that and what that's like. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious what the future of that might look like, especially given that um, the tariffs have been a little bit everywhere, but everything under the USMCA has continued to be exempt. So I'm curious if we kind of think something that will continue or if it will kind of be a completely restructured agreement.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I think that it's going to get to a point where we'll get closer to where we were with the USMCA and the elimination of a lot of the tariffs. because it's impacting both sides of the border. It's impacting the U.S. Economy. It's impacting the Canadian economy. It's impacting inflation in the United States because tariffs are applied to vehicles and all the other goods if they apply the tariffs. And thankfully, right now, most of them are not being charged. The real struggle is going to be in the Midwest, I think, for farmers. I think farmers in the Midwest are being hit really hard, particularly in the soybean um, side of the business. I just read an article, or not read. I talked to one of uh, my colleagues here in Florida, and he's from Iowa, and he said there's a lot of farmers that are going bankrupt because the soybeans are not being sold, which they were originally being sold to China, but because of the high tariffs, China is now no longer buying soybeans from the U.S. So the USMCA negotiation should bring some of those things to light, that it's important for the U.S. economy to have lower tariffs as well, because they're not going to be able to export the goods abroad, and it's causing some significant challenges in the U.S. economy. And that's only one sector. There's other sectors that are impacted by it. You hear the stories of small businesses that are trying to import chocolate, and some of the small retail outlets in various communities throughout the country that are buying goods from abroad that they can't get here in the United States, and their prices are going up, and therefore their sales have been impacted. So I think hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and the USMCA negotiation will have those people bringing some of those things to light so that they can look at it pragmatically and make a smart decision to affect both economies in a positive way to help those people that are affected by that. So I think the USMCA negotiation will be an interesting one. It's a year out, and a lot happens in a year. And, things are happening daily here and
Mhm.
throughout North America.
I think that, I personally, I would love to somehow, I mean, this would never happen, but somehow I would love to be able to just like sit in the room and listen to the negotiations, or just like accidentally end up on the email chain. Would be great. I know that that would never happen, but I would love it. As someone who likes to sit and just kind of watch chaos unfold, would love that. But I think you're right. Like the thing is with global economy and like a global supply chain and global logistics, is that the global part is in there. And so you really have to have everybody doing their part to make sure that they're not to make sure that there's not a huge wrench thrown in the plan, or a whole house of cards comes tumbling down. Because that's the problem with the global economy, is that it's truly global. So things that happen in one area will affect the other, whether you want it to or not. But that being said, we are running out of time today. So that there is one question that we have left for you that pretty much everyone that has been on the show since our 150th episode has answered, and you two are no exception. If you could build a house out of any food, what would it be?
Cheesecake.
Ooh, okay, okay. Follow-up question, would it be just like original New York style cheesecake, or would you have different cheesecake for each room?
Oh, I think you got to have different cheesecakes for each room. That way you can select what room you want to be in today. It's got to be the New
I'll tell
York
you right now, if
style.
you had an Oreo cheesecake room, I would not get out of it.
There you go. See, cheesecake. I'm all over that.
I absolutely love that. That's a first. We haven't had cheesecake yet, and that's a really, really good one. That's just I feel like that would smell delicious.
Oh, can you imagine a house built with cheesecake,
Mm.
chocolate,
Okay, now I'm
coffee,
hungry.
strawberry, cherry.
Yeah,
You
get them all. And have, like, a rotating room that, like, rotates, like, a seasonal flavor.
Oh yeah, that's a swirl.
Mhm. Alright, Keith, if anyone has any questions for maybe the best cheesecake to use for your cheesecake house, or if they have any questions about what trade between US and Canada looks like, where can they find you outside the show?
Yeah, you can just check me out on LinkedIn or nadlogistics.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Mary.
You can find Check All the Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows, and don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.